Marcus opens the app the same way he opens it every Friday, thumb already anticipating the number. And this Friday should feel good because the news has been saying the same thing for 6 straight days. The S&P 500 just closed at an all-time high, up 24% this year. So Marcus taps in, expecting to see something that finally matches the headline. He sees his 401k up 2.1%. Not down, not a disaster, just 2%. He reads the headline again. He reads his balance again. Same year, same country, same market everybody's screaming about. And he does the math in his head, and the math does not work. Nobody lied to him. The S&P really is up 24%. His account really is only up 2%. And the space between those two numbers is where this video lives, because that gap has a name. And once you understand it, you'll never read a markets hit record high headline the same way again. My name is Nick, and today we're going to find out where Marcus's other 22% went, because it didn't vanish. Somebody has it. It's just not him. Here's the trick, and it's simpler than Wall Street wants it to be. When you hear the S&P is up 24%, you assume that means the average company in it grew 24%, spread evenly across all 500 of them, like a rising tide lifting every boat the same amount. It doesn't work that way. The S&P 500 is what's called cap-weighted, which means the bigger a company already is, the more it controls the index's movement. Picture 500 people in a room holding hands in a circle, and you're told the circle moved 24% today. Sounds like everyone took a big step, except 5 of those people are giants, each one alone as heavy as 50 of the others combined. And when those 5 lean forward, the whole circle appears to move, even if 495 people didn't budge an inch. That's not a metaphor. That's the actual mechanical structure of the fund sitting inside Marcus's 401k. Right now, the 7 largest companies in America, the ones you already know by name, make up roughly a third of the entire S&P 500's value. 1/3 of the index in 7 stocks out of 500. So when those 7 have a blockbuster year, the index headline moves like everyone's celebrating. Meanwhile, a huge chunk of the other 493 companies could be flat or down or quietly bleeding, and the number on the news would still say record high because the giants are doing the leaning. Marcus doesn't own 7 stocks. Marcus owns a target date fund his HR department picked for him during onboarding, a wide, diversified basket that does hold those giants, but also holds hundreds of smaller, slower-moving companies that had a perfectly ordinary, unremarkable year. His account isn't broken. It's just honest. It reflects 500 companies. The headline reflects 7 of them wearing a very large costume. Now let's talk about Priya, because Priya did something that sounds smart and is actually the second reason Marcus's number looks small. Priya's uncle told her at Thanksgiving that the market's been on fire. So in March, she took a $10,000 bonus and dropped the whole thing in at once. Lump sum, one shot, right before a rough 2-week stretch where the market dipped 8%. Priya's $10,000 became $9,200 almost immediately, and it took months to claw back. Marcus, meanwhile, never made a decision at all. His contribution comes out of every single paycheck, a little bit every 2 weeks, whether the market is up, down, or sideways that day. That's called dollar cost averaging, and it's not a strategy Marcus chose on purpose, it's just what a payroll system does automatically. But here's what it means for his 2% number. Some of his contributions this year bought in near the top, some bought in during the dips. His return isn't the market's return, it's the blended average of 24 different entry points scattered across the year, most of them made before the big run-up even started. He's not underperforming the market, he's measuring a different question than the headline is answering. The headline asks, what did $100 invested on January 1st turn into by December? Marcus's account answers, what did money invested a little at a time all year long turn into? Those are two completely different math problems wearing the same percentage sign. Then there's the one nobody ever checks, and it's the quiet killer sitting inside almost every retirement account in the country: fees. Marcus's target date fund charges an expense ratio of 0.6% a year. Sounds small, practically a rounding error, except it doesn't come out once, dramatically, where he'd notice. It comes out silently, every single day, compounding against him the exact same way his contributions are supposed to compound for him. Run that 0.6% forward over a 35-year career, and it doesn't cost Marcus 0.6% of his final balance. It costs him something closer to 15 to 20% of his entire retirement just for the privilege of not comparing fund options for 10 minutes one afternoon. Some funds charge 0.03%. Some charge 1.2%. Nobody at open enrollment reads that number out loud, and it's the single biggest predictor of how much of the market's return actually survives long enough to become Marcus's money. Let me show you what that fee actually looks like on a real timeline, because 15 to 20% of your retirement is one of those numbers that sounds bad and doesn't actually land until you meet the person it happened to. Meet Tom. Tom is 58. Tom has been contributing to the same 401k for 31 years, diligently. Never missed a paycheck deduction, never panic sold in 2008 or 2020, did everything the personal finance articles told him to do. Tom's fund has charged 1.1% a year the entire time, a fee he has genuinely never once looked at because it was never presented to him as a decision. It was just the default option his plan enrolled him into on day one. Run Tom's actual 31 years of contributions at the market's real historical return. Then run the same 31 years with that 1.1% quietly shaved off every single year, and the two Toms end up in different tax brackets in retirement. The version of Tom who happened to get defaulted into the cheap fund instead of the expensive one has hundreds of thousands of dollars more for making zero additional decisions, taking zero additional risk, and contributing zero additional dollars. Same Tom, same market, same 31 years. The only difference between rich Tom and poor Tom is a single line item he never read on a form he signed once in his 20s and never opened again. That's not a market outcome. That's a paperwork outcome wearing a market costume. Now, before this turns into the whole system is fake, let's be fair, because the market really did go up 24%, and pretending otherwise would be its own kind of lie. The S&P really did hit a record. Real companies really did become more valuable. This isn't a hoax. So who actually captured that 24%? That's the steelman, and it's also where this gets uncomfortable. The people who owned the most of those 7 giant companies before the run-up captured almost all of it, because a percentage gain on a massive existing position is a massive dollar gain, and a percentage gain on a small, recently started position is a small dollar gain, even though the percentage on the screen looks identical. The top 10% of Americans by wealth own roughly 87% of all stock market value in this country. Not 87% of the gains, 87% of the shares that produce them. Marcus's 2% and some hedge fund managers' 24% are the exact same market, experienced through 2 completely different sized positions. The index didn't discriminate. The ownership already had. And it compounds in a direction that should bother you more than it usually does. Because the person who already owns the most shares isn't just starting ahead, they're growing from a bigger base every single year, which means the gap between owns a lot and owns a little doesn't stay the same percentage apart. It widens in raw dollars every time the market has a good year. A good year for the stock market is structurally a better year for the person who already had the most stock. That's not a conspiracy. Nobody's cheating. It's just what compounding does to unequal starting positions, quietly, every single trading day, whether anyone's paying attention or not. And here's what that actually feels like. Because a statistic is just a feeling somebody put in a spreadsheet. It feels like scrolling past a headline about record wealth on your lunch break and quietly wondering if you did something wrong. It feels like sitting in a meeting where a coworker mentions their portfolio's having an incredible year and doing the polite nod while doing very different math in your head. It feels like opening the app on a Friday, seeing a green number that's technically good news, and somehow still feeling like you're behind. Because the only comparison point you've ever been given is a headline built for someone else's balance sheet entirely. It feels like doing everything the article told you to do. Automatic contributions, diversified fund, never touching it in a downturn, and still ending up standing next to a number that makes you feel like the article left something out. It did. It left out who the headline was actually describing. All right, here's the number I've been holding. The median American with a 401k has been contributing for years, doing everything right. Automatic enrollment, steady paycheck deductions, never panic sold. If that person's account had actually captured the S&P's full advertised return over the last decade, compounding cleanly, they'd be sitting on a specific, calculable number. The real median 401k balance for someone in their 40s is currently around $60,000. Run the honest math on what a decade of the market's average return should have produced from typical contribution levels, and the gap between what the headline implies and what actually lands in a normal account isn't a rounding error. It's often tens of thousands of dollars, quietly explained by fees, timing, and concentration. 3 things nobody put on the recruitment poster. But here's the part that matters more than the number. Marcus isn't bad at this. He didn't fail a test. He's not behind some invisible class of people who get it. He's experiencing the honest, structural result of how a cap-weighted index, a payroll contribution schedule, and a quietly priced fee actually interact over time. Nobody sat him down and explained that the market and my account are only loosely related words. He was just handed a headline and left to assume the gap was his fault. And Tom wasn't reckless either. Tom did the responsible thing for 31 straight years. The only difference between the Tom who retires comfortably and the Tom who doesn't was never discipline. It was a checkbox he was never told mattered. So what do you actually do with this? First, open your own retirement account and find one number, the expense ratio. It's usually a single line, often buried, sometimes labeled something bland like gross expense ratio. If it's over 0.5% and there's a comparable index fund option inside your plan charging 1/10 of that, that switch alone, made once, compounds for the rest of your career without you ever thinking about it again. It will likely take you less time than it took to watch this video so far. Second, stop comparing your account's percentage to the S&P's headline percentage. They are not measuring the same thing, and they were never going to match. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because one measures 7 giants and the other measures your actual paycheck arriving on actual different days. Third, understand that dollar cost averaging isn't a flaw. It's the reason you're not Priya. And over a full career, it tends to smooth out far more risk than it costs you in missed timing. And fourth, if you want to know exactly what your specific fund, your specific fees, and your specific contribution schedule are really doing over the next 20 or 30 years, that's the kind of number we actually run for people inside our school community. Real accounts, not headline math. Links in the description if you want in. Marcus didn't quit his 401k. He didn't panic and move everything to cash because the number looked small next to the news. He opened the fund fact sheet for the first time in 4 years, found the expense ratio, found a comparable index option charging 1/5 of what he was paying, and switched it in about 6 minutes. He didn't do it because he suddenly understood cap weighting perfectly. He did it because he finally knew which number was actually his to control. The market's 24% was never going to be his number. It was never built to be. His 2%, quietly compounding, fee-adjusted, paycheck by paycheck, actually is. That's the one worth checking on a Friday. not the headline, the account. Because the market wasn't lying to him. He was just reading the wrong number and calling it his.